They wrote it down, every technique, every method, every way to break a human being. They classified it, they buried it, and for 34 years, nobody outside the agency was supposed to see it. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a declassified United States government document, and it has a code name: KUBARK. In our last episode, we met Dr. Ewan Cameron, a psychiatrist who erased the minds of his own patients at a Montreal hospital, using sensory deprivation, electroshock, drug-induced sleep that lasted weeks at a time, all of it funded secretly by the Central Intelligence Agency under a program called MKUltra. Cameron died in 1967. But what he built did not die with him. The CIA had been watching, funding, documenting. And when Cameron's work was done, they took what they learned and they put it in a manual. That manual is what we are looking at today. First, what was KUBARK? KUBARK was not a person, not a place, not a program. KUBARK was the CIA's own internal code name for itself. They named the torture manual after themselves. The document is 128 pages long. Classified secret, drafted in July 1963. 16 years before Cameron's victims received their first settlements. 2 years after MKUltra was still running at full capacity. Its official title is the KUBARK Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual, and it was not a fringe document written by a rogue officer in a basement somewhere. It was an official training guide, distributed to CIA interrogators, used to teach American intelligence officers how to break a resistant human being using methods that had been tested on real people. The connection to Cameron is not speculation. The manual explicitly draws on psychological research into sensory deprivation, regression, and identity destruction. The same research Cameron was conducting at McGill, funded by the same agency that wrote this manual. Cameron broke people in a hospital. KUBARK turned those methods into a curriculum. So how did we find it? We went to the CIA's own reading room first. It is right there on their website, cia.gov, the nation's first line of defense. That is what it says on their homepage. We searched for KUBARK, 1,351 results, case logs, personnel files, administrative memos, retirement programs. The manual was not there, but someone else made sure you could find it. The Internet Archive hosts the full document, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request by the Black Vault, the largest government records clearinghouse in the world. 128 pages, available to anyone with an internet connection. The CIA did not put it there. They were forced. Here is how that happened. In June 1995, the Baltimore Sun published a 4-part investigation, prize-winning journalism, into something happening in a small country called Honduras. People were disappearing. Students, teachers, union workers, lawyers. They were being abducted off the street, sometimes in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, by men in ski masks driving double-cab Toyota trucks with tinted windows and stolen license plates. They were taken to secret detention facilities, and they were never seen again. The unit responsible was called Battalion 316, a Honduran military intelligence unit. And the more the Baltimore Sun dug, the more a pattern emerged. The techniques being used on prisoners were not improvised cruelty. They were structured, methodical, trained. Newly declassified documents showed that the CIA was instrumental in training and equipping Battalion 316. Members were flown to a secret location in the United States for training in surveillance and interrogation, and later given CIA training at Honduran bases. On May 26, 1994, the Baltimore Sun filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the CIA. They requested all information on Battalion 316, all information on CIA training and assistance provided to its members, and all information relating to possible human rights violations. The CIA resisted for 3 years, then came the threat of a lawsuit. On January 24, 1997, the KUBARK manual was declassified. They did not release it because they wanted to. They released it because they had no choice. So what does it actually say? We are going to read directly from the document now. These are not summaries. This is what the CIA wrote in their own words in an official training manual. Section 9 is titled, The Coercive Counterintelligence Interrogation of Resistant Sources. It opens by listing the principal coercive techniques available to an interrogator: arrest, detention, deprivation of sensory stimuli through solitary confinement, threats and fear, debility, pain, heightened suggestibility and hypnosis, and heavy doses of drugs. Let us go through each one. Arrest. The manual says that the manner and timing of arrest can contribute substantially to the interrogator's purposes. It states that the goal is to achieve, if possible, the maximum amount of mental discomfort, to catch the suspect off balance, and to deprive him of the initiative. It recommends arrest in the early hours of the morning, when a person's physical and psychological resistance is at its lowest. This is not a suggestion, it is an instruction. Detention. Once arrested. The manual describes how the environment itself becomes a weapon. It states that familiar clothing should be immediately taken away. And then this: if the subject is especially proud or neat, it may be useful to give him an outfit 1 or 2 sizes too large, and to fail to provide a belt, so that he must hold his pants up. Read that again. They thought about the belt. They wrote it down. They trained people to do it. The goal is stated plainly in the document. A person's sense of identity depends upon a continuity in his surroundings, habits, appearance, actions, and relations with others. Detention is designed to cut through those links and throw the subject back upon his own unaided internal resources. Strip a person of their clothes, their belt, their routine, their sense of time, and you strip them of themselves. Sensory deprivation. The manual cites research showing that isolation acts on most persons as a powerful stress. The goal is to remove as much sensory input as possible: sounds, light, human contact, temperature variation, smell, touch, time. The manual recommends keeping the light on at all times. No windows, no schedule, no way to judge the hour, no way to know how long you have been there or how long you will remain. This is not a side effect of detention, it is the point: threats and fear. The manual states that the threat of coercion usually weakens or destroys resistance more effectively than coercion itself. The threat to inflict pain can trigger fears more damaging than the immediate sensation of pain. In other words, they do not always have to hurt you. They just have to make you believe they will. Debility. Physical weakening through prolonged constraint, extremes of heat, cold, or moisture. Deprivation of food or sleep granted irregularly, in more than abundance or less than adequacy, the shifts occurring on no discernible time pattern. The manual notes this will normally disorient an interrogatee and sap his will to resist. Pain, hypnosis, drugs. The manual covers all 3 in clinical detail, with citations, with research, with named psychologists and published studies. This is what made KUBARK different from ordinary brutality. It was scientific. It had footnotes. The conclusion of Section 9 summarizes all of it in a numbered list. Point 1. The principal coercive techniques are arrest, detention, the deprivation of sensory stimuli, threats and fear, debility, pain, heightened suggestibility, and hypnosis, and drugs. Point 2. If 2 or more coercive techniques are to be used jointly, they should be chosen for their effect upon the individual and carefully selected to match his personality. Point 3. The usual effect of coercion is regression. The interrogatee's mature defenses crumble as he becomes more childlike. During the process of regression, the subject may experience feelings of guilt, and it is usually useful to intensify these. Point 4. When regression has proceeded far enough so that the subject's desire to yield begins to overbalance his resistance, the interrogator should supply a face-saving rationalization. Like the coercive technique, the rationalization must be carefully chosen to fit the subject's personality. Point 5. The pressures of duress should be slackened or lifted after compliance has been obtained, so that the subject's voluntary cooperation will not be impeded. They wrote that down. It is usually useful to intensify feelings of guilt in a person you have broken. That is the document. That is the instruction. Stamped secret. Distributed to CIA officers in 1963. Now, here's where it gets worse. This next part is not in the files, but here is what we know. In 1985, someone went back into the manual. A page was inserted advising against the use of coercive techniques. Handwritten edits were introduced throughout the text, 22 years after the manual was written. They tried to clean it up, but the original text was still visible, still readable, still there. And the techniques described in it had already been in use for over 2 decades. We know this because of Inés Consuelo Murillo in March of 1983. Inés was 24 years old. She was walking with a friend along a road near Choloma, a small town on the northern coast of Honduras. 2 trucks pulled up. Men got out. Her captors tied her hands and feet, hung her naked from the ceiling, and beat her. They nearly drowned her. They clipped wires to her body and sent electricity surging through her. She spent 78 days in a Battalion 316 secret detention facility. What she described was not chaos, it was not rage, it was a system. The light was kept on at all times. There were no windows in the room. She had no way to judge the time of day. No particular schedule of questioning was kept. Sensory deprivation, temporal disorientation, sleep deprivation, exactly as the manual described. The 2 battalion members she identified as among her torturers had graduated from a CIA interrogation course on March 13, 1983. It was the same day Murillo was seized. The same day. And there was someone else present. Murillo stated that during her captivity, she had often been tortured in the presence of a CIA advisor, known only as Mr. Mike, and that he at one time submitted questions for her interrogators to ask. The CIA officer waited outside the interrogation room and reviewed the questions to be asked. After her answers were delivered to him, he would suggest further questions. He checked on her condition twice a day. The CIA's own Deputy Director for Operations confirmed this in secret Senate testimony in 1988. They knew. They were there. And they kept going. Inés Murillo survived. At least 184 people are missing and presumed dead. In 1983, the Reagan administration awarded General Gustavo Alvarez Martinez, the man who commanded Battalion 316, the Legion of Merit, for encouraging the success of democratic processes in Honduras. That is the official record. KUBARK was not an accident. It was not one rogue officer. It was the institutionalization of what Dr. Ewan Cameron proved could be done to a human mind. Cameron broke people in a Montreal hospital with CIA funding. KUBARK turned those methods into a training program. Battalion 316 took that training into the real world. The CIA was present. They were informed. And for 34 years, the document sat classified until a newspaper threatened to sue. The files were always there. It just took someone willing to look. Up next, on the Realize Files, we explore Operation Northwoods, exposing real lies with real eyes.